Greetings, traveler. Right now, you might be preparing for a future interview, or maybe you've done a few interviews and you just don't know what's going on in the whole process. You don't know if you're doing good or bad or whatever. It's easy to feel lost. So, today, I'm going to tell you how to make interviewers chase you to hire you in their company. So, my name is Xanthos. I've been working in the games industry for the past decade or so. And I created this podcast after popular demand to share what I have done in the past that helped me, and hopefully through that I can help some other people out there as well. So let's just jump in. So why would somebody want to hire you specifically in the games industry? Well, if you think about it, when someone posts a job opening, they have a problem they need to solve. They have a game project and they don't know enough about game design, so they want you to help with that. Or they've been going at it engineering wise and they're just not getting the performance they need out of the project, or any other myriad reasons and challenges that might rise up in a project. So your goal will be to showcase you are the right person. But as it so happens, the game interviewing process is very often misleading and dark and mysterious. So let's try to put some light into that. First of all, why are game interviews often so bad and so misleading? Well, there's a very simple reason for that. Every person out there who's working in the industry have a specialty that they like for themselves, be it game design or art or anything else. Because we love games so much, and because we want to give our best effort in our skill related to games, we try to focus on it as much as possible. So if it's art, people learn art all day long. If it's engineering, they look up all the ways they can make their code better, and so on. And you'll notice how in that flow, talking to people sometimes is not part of your skill. Moreover, finding out if other people are suitable for a game project in its large scale is a completely different skill set altogether. So sometimes people in manager positions or above may have a good idea about what they're looking for in the other person and what the needs of the project are, but quite often they just don't know. They've been told by someone, hey, interview this person, or we spoke to that person already, talk to them as well, tell us what your opinion is. So when the interviewer is told that prior to going into an interview, then that interviewer will feel very lost as well for what should be discussed during the interview. So a very common problem of interviews is they start by asking you what you've done up to now, what companies you've worked at, what projects you've worked in. Then they might share a little bit about the project and their company, so the role and what kind of game they're working on and so on. And then they will dive deeper into questions about your past and what you did in previous positions and so on. And often we feel this pressure to talk about that and prove why we did before is good for this position that we're interviewing now. That is what I call the hard mode. So without knowing basically anything about what the project you're interviewing for is like, you jump in and you try to say, oh, I'm so good at this and I'm so good at that. I have a little prop today to perhaps show how we feel. So this is Paul. I don't know if you can see him properly. So he's like an adventurer in the dark, right? He's got his gear and his sword and he's ready to face everything. He's got his lantern in front of him, most important of all, to help him navigate the darkness. And he's out there. He's just doing his best without really knowing if it's helping him in his situation. And when it's time for the interview, we get met with something like this very scary looking, big, strong beetle knight. So when you finally get to meet your interviewer, you feel that the situation is pretty intimidating. You feel that if everything goes well, you should lose this fight. It feels like a fight. So how can we make it so that we don't stay stuck in this endless loop of trying to appeal and try to say, well, we're so good in all these things, particularly when we know that we're not good at everything, we're just good at the things we have confidence in. And how can we help the big, scary interviewer do his job more easily and help him find out if we are somebody they should be hiring, or we're not a good match, or they should be looking for something else. This is the problem we should be helping each other solve during the interview. So here's how to do it in the easy mode. The easy mode would be this. The interviewer will start by saying, so please tell me what you've done in the past, what your strong points are, what your weak points are, and so on. All these questions are irrelevant. They are asking them out of simple fear of looking unprofessional in the interview. They know they need to ask something. They know vaguely that they're supposed to learn more about you. And crucially, they're forgetting why they're doing the interview. The interview happens simply so they can tell their manager or whoever is controlling the hiring process whether they should hire you or not. That's the only thing they should be thinking about. But as I mentioned, it's very easy to get lost in this process. So they will say, so please tell us your experience in past positions. Normally what you would say is, oh, I did this and that, and keep going for about an hour. Let's do this in the easy mode and let's stop. Let's instead say, well, before I worked in so-and-so position, but if it's okay with you, if it's all right, if it wouldn't be too much of a problem, would it be okay for me to ask more about this project? And it's very important to be extremely respectful, extremely polite when you're making this shift in, in the flow of the conversation, because you don't want to appear rude and you want to help the other person understand you. That's the whole goal of the conversation. It's to help them discover why you are the right person for the job. A different way to think about this is if you're at home and your faucet stops working and you need to call a plumber to fix it. When you call the plumber, do you need to know all his past history and his ideals and his dreams and hopes? Well, those are nice to know, but more specifically, you want to know if he can fix your faucet. That is the main basic question. So for the interviewer, while he's lost and he's scared and he's saying all these things, what he really wants to know is, can you fix the issue or challenge that they're currently facing in their project? That's the whole reason why this position opening started in the first place. So by asking, is it okay for me to ask you a few questions? Or could you tell me more about the type of game you're making right now? And of course, there will be things that they cannot reveal, like the exact title or very specific details. But in the games industry, there's all these patterns that keep emerging. So the types of projects and the challenges they face and so on. So he will say something like, yeah, I cannot share everything, but what I can tell you is right now, for example, we are developing this open world game, and a very crucial part is a level design, because the player has a lot of time to spend exploring the world, and we want to make it as interesting as possible. And then you can say, that's fascinating. I'm very interested in that. I love level design. Can you tell me specifically what the challenge is here? And this will help the interviewer think exactly why you are having this conversation right now. It's not just because their boss told them, go interview this person. It's not because they want to know if you're a nice person. Those things are true, but they're not the point right now. They want to know if you can make, say for this example, the level design more interesting for the player to explore. And so they can say that. Actually, we've been working on this level, but we feel that the player is bored when they're going through the level, and we would like to make it more interesting. And this is exactly the kind of golden opportunity that you have to jump in and help them know specifically why you're the right plumber, let's say, for this kind of problem. So how can you go about it? You can say, yes, this is something I've encountered before. I spoke before about the STAR method. This is a very good environment to use it. So specifically, you want to say two things, right? One, you cannot assume you know everything about the project, so you must be respectful and inquisitive about the process. And two, show what you have done in the past that's relevant to this. And this helps you in many ways. So your past experience shows that you have already solved this problem, so it makes this person think that perhaps you can solve it for them as well. And it also helps you navigate your history and show to the interviewer that no matter what you've done before, perhaps it was in a different position, perhaps it was in a different company or a different industry altogether, but you have the capacity to think about your history and use your experience to leverage it in the solution of this problem. So you can say something like, well, when before I was in a different company, we weren't exactly working with large levels, maybe we were working with small levels, but we had the same problem. Even though the levels were small, the player was getting lost. And so you can go into specific details about your approach. So you can say something like, we saw that the player was getting lost because there was no immediately visible objective, so this is one of the things we added. Second, we also wanted to add some pressure to the level, so we increased the number of enemies. So the player had more motivation to be efficient with their time and their resources. So, and you can go in as much detail as you want, but I wouldn't go too far here. You don't have to go into appeal mode all over again. All you need to do is show the other person that, first of all, you heard them, you understand them, and you're interested in helping them. And then after you share 2 or 3 points, you can stop yourself and say, this is my experience up to now. Is this helpful for you? Does this sound like your situation? So I'd like to say 9 times out of 10, but it's probably more like 10 times out of 10. This person will say, yes, that's exactly what we're facing right now, because we're very good at making associations as people. Actually, our specific problem is, and there, my friend, I'm even going to put these guys down. There, you have exactly the kind of environment you need to show to that person that A, you understood what the issue is, B, you have relevant experience, and now with the extra information that the interviewer is sharing, you can go and deliver the golden punch, let's say, in this situation, where you can say how you think you could go about solving this problem. Now, of course, the interview is not exactly the kind of space where you can create a whole document or make a full presentation about your full-length solution, but you can give enough details to let the other person know that, okay, this is what you say you will do in this situation. If you did that, yeah, I suppose that would work. And if you can make them think that what you just said is a possible good solution for the project, then that's exactly where you want to be. Then that person is convinced that you are the right person for the job. Now here, you might be skeptical about this, and this has happened to me before, saying that, well, if I share the solution with them, won't they just go and implement it? They won't need me anymore. Yes, they can. That is 100% true. This is a very real skepticism about it. However, thinking about your interviewer, if they really wanted to steal your solution and sneakily use it and not reward you for your effort and your time, they could have done it. But that's not what they want to do. They don't want to sit down and do, let's say, game design work or engineering work or sound or art or whatever you're applying for. Even if they're in the same discipline as you, since they are interviewing you, they are more likely higher up in the ladder of the company or the project. So they have bigger responsibilities and more effective uses for their time than implementing this one solution you are discussing right now. What they want is to hire you to solve this problem. They just want to know that you are the right person to jump into the project, understand it, talk to people around you, just like you spoke with the interviewer when you were asking more about the project. Get all the real information about the project and then try to solve it. So the simple framework for this would be, first, stop after you had a small chance to introduce yourself and the project and your projects that you worked before, and ask a question about the interviewer's project. This is what many people call hijacking the process. Well, it's not exactly hijacking in this case, it's just trying to help, really. So ask them, so what kind of project are you working on? What type of challenges are you dealing with? And then that should initiate the conversation towards that direction. If the other person doesn't want to talk about that, that's completely fine. Let them continue. Perhaps there will be an opportunity to ask about that later on. Or perhaps they were planning to ask you more specifically for a sample use case later on, but don't worry about it and just continue with the interview. So back to the first step of the framework, try to ask a question about their project and how it relates to you and how you can help as quickly as possible. 2, ask about the challenges of the project. So what they're dealing with right now, what is the issue, secretly what's the purpose of this interview, why do they need to hire another person in their team, since budget is always an issue with the game companies. Try to find out about that. And 3, when you understand enough about their challenges, and this might take 1 or 2 or 3 questions as necessary. Maybe you cannot find something relevant in your experience right away. That's completely fine. Just keep repeating what the interviewer said and say, from what you say, it sounds like you're dealing with so and so and so, but I'm not very familiar with your project. Does that sound correct? And then they will keep talking about the project and give you more information to work with. And then you can continue from that point on and showcase your relevant experience. And instead, using this three-step framework, instead of having an hour-long conversation about your history and your personality and your likes and dislikes, all of which are good points, by the way, but they're not helpful necessarily for letting the other person know, the interviewer, if you are the correct person to solve their problems or to tackle their challenges. So that is the simple 3-step framework I have about this. And this framework has helped me get 30 or more offers from game industry companies in the past. And let me tell you 2 examples of how this worked for me in the past and what the results were. So at some point I was applying for work in a Japanese games company. It was a game design position, and the interviewer went completely into this standard autopilot mode of tell us about your history, tell us about your previous positions, tell us what that was like. You can see why they're asking that, right? They're trying to fish out of you if you are the right person for the job, but it's very inefficient. So at that point I had worked in 4 companies in the past. So instead of going the hard mode and trying to appeal about all the wonderful things I did in my past, I talked about my whole history in 1 sentence. I said, oh, I worked in this and this and that company, but you know all this already because you've read my CV, so you're essentially rewarding them for saying that I know you're professional and I know you're serious about this, so of course you checked my CV. And I said, well, if you would like to talk specifically about any of my positions, I'll be happy to answer that. And if it's okay with you, I would also like to ask about the current position and about the current project. I saw that it's some sort of mobile game that has strategy elements. So there I used my knowledge of what I knew about the project from the project description and the job description, and from the people I spoke to in that project already, so HR or the recruiting agent or anybody who was available to me by that point. And that specifically helped the interviewer go straight into the meaningful, the real conversation of this interview. So there he told me that it is indeed a real-time strategy game for mobile. He said that the new and interesting thing about that game was that instead of a typical Clash of Clans type of game where there's two players and you're the attacker or the defender, this project was about having a three-way fight. So a fight between three players. So if one player is clearly stronger than the other two, then the other two can band together and create all these interesting strategies for defeating the stronger player. And then they could fight it out between themselves to see who would win the match. I said, that's a really interesting concept. I've never worked with a three-way battle game before, but I have worked with a four-way battle game before. And then I went into my experience about that, and we talked about specific mechanics that I implemented and how that worked out. I'm sure you have lots of examples like that from your history. And then we talked about the game engine itself, why using Unreal wouldn't be a good idea in this case, and what the alternatives were. And to make a long story short, by the end of that interview, we didn't go into any more details about my previous positions and the previous companies. We spoke specifically about what their problem was and how I could attempt to help them with it. That's my whole intent for this process, and that's the best I can offer during the interview. Of course, they wanted to have a follow-up, and long story short, that single interview, even though they wanted to have more information and see how I would work on it, that single interview was enough to offer me the highest salary position that I had until that point in my career. And when I implemented these solutions in the project was praised enough to be reviewed by the CEO of the company, and us getting permission to work on it more and do even crazier things with it. But you might be thinking, okay, but how do I know this will work for me? How do I know that this process is something I can replicate? Well, I actually happened to be in this situation several times before, where I relayed this story to other people around me who also wanted to interview for the games industry and had bad experience already with how most game industry people do this process, and why it's bad and why it's ineffective, and why at the end of the interview both parties go away without really knowing if this was good or bad or on point or what. So specifically, my friend Angie, who is an extremely talented artist and animator, she wanted to apply to the company that I was working at the time. Same company, completely different department, different people. I didn't know anyone there. All I could do for her was to say that I know someone who's interested in that project and if they would like to talk to her. So the people from that project were interested. They didn't know me. They didn't know her before this time talking. So what I could offer to help her in this case would tell her that, listen, I know this is not very standard and perhaps you haven't done this before, but what I want you to do is just simply talk about the project and talk about your relevant experience when you get to meet them. Is that something you can do? She said yes. And for the people that were conducting the interview, I said, look, I know you have a lot of questions you want to ask her, and let's save that for a future interview. For this first initial talk, let's just talk casually about the project and about her specific skills, and you can talk to her later on about a more proper, serious interview and follow the standard format. So we met, and after some quick introductions, I didn't even speak at all during this process. They just started saying that they had a quick look at her CV. They saw some of the things she had done before, but the point of this interview was to talk specifically about the project, its challenges, and how she could help them with it. So they only spoke about that, the challenges and how she could help, what her relevant skills were, what she did before that was helpful for this position, and how she would go about solving the challenges they were currently facing. But this is still just on a conversation level. No actual work was done for this, no materials were presented, nothing like that. Long story short, the formal interview never happened. They were so happy with the information they got from her during that friendly chat instead of the interview that they went ahead and they gave her a job offer right away. This was exactly the information they needed to answer to themselves and to the project leader whether this was the right person to hire. And they thanked me for setting up this very new style interview, although I hardly did anything. I just said, well, let's have a casual chat first. And for my friend as well, she said that this process was so much better for her because she knew that normally for interviews, 3 or so steps in the process are pretty standard. So have the first interview and then the second one and then the third one, possibly even more. Meet multiple people, meet the CEO of the company, meet various department leaders. And all these meetings happen to make sure that this person matches the culture, has the skills to help with the project and so on. But if you could compress that and have the real talk in one meeting, what could be more valuable than that for all these kind of situations? So that's my real world experience with this. So it has worked for several people in that case. If you're thinking, well, but in this case you set up the whole process. Yes and no. It happens often that for interviewing in a company, you already know someone there. So you say, hey, I'm interested. Would it be okay for you to set up an interview for me? So this happens very often in the games industry. But as I said before, even if this does not happen for you and you're just going blind for a fresh interview, just by hijacking the process, so to speak, and shifting the focus towards the specific project and what their needs are, you can have exactly the same results and you can help them understand your situation more and how you could help them much faster. So I hope this helps. If you know someone who is preparing for an interview or they've had a lot of difficult experiences with this, please feel free to share this video with them. If you have questions about this process or you would like me to cover any of these topics in more length, please let me know. Other than that, thank you for your time and have fun.